Hey, what's happening, everyone? Welcome to our Tuesday recap edition here on Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. I'm Dan Bespris, and we have, I think, I don't know, sometimes I'll throw it out there, a relatively simple card to decipher. I don't know. We say that, and then anything can happen. You can find me on Twitter at Dan Bespris, DanBesbris. I'm Old Man Squad over on the brand new Blue Sky, should you feel so inclined to follow over there. Those feeds are basically carbon copies of one another for the moment. We're Old Man Squad Fantasy on Instagram as well. Please hit that like button as you settle in. If you're listening after the fact, subscribe, drop a 5-star review. It's extraordinarily helpful, and I'm so appreciative of all of you guys that have done it so far. This Thanksgiving holiday, why not head to the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting? Bet Online. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, Bet Online provides you with constant, real-time odds and action and the ability to watch the games as they happen with the largest selection of odds on everything from football to NBA and college basketball, UFC, boxing, and hockey. Head to the website today to see why Bet Online is America's most trusted site for online wagering. A Bet Online, the game starts here. Let's begin with, actually, you know what? I want to do something different. Let's do something different. I was going to start by just diving straight into the box scores, and ultimately that might be kind of what we do, because the player that I wanted to talk about first is in the first game. But here's a tweet that I sent out at the conclusion of the first game on the docket, which was Wizards and Bulls. And that is, Alex Sarr upside games are on full display lately. It's not going to be pretty every night, but the fantasy lines are going to be robust as the season goes. He had 20 points, 4 3-pointers, 7 boards, 3 assists, 1 steal, and 1 block. And the percentages were better in this one, which is the big deal for him. Shot 7 out of 11 from the field. And yeah, he missed a couple of free throws, but you know, you're starting to see it a little bit. He's up to 128 on the season. He's still shooting under 38% from the field, despite all of these slightly better games lately. And the steals and the blocks remain good. The scoring is trending up. There's all these really nice signs happening with him. And this is why he's consistently the guy that I think we should be squatting on this year. And it's 2 good ones in a row, actually, when you think about it from that perspective. I know he didn't shoot that great in the last one at 47%. That's serviceable. But over the last 2 games, he's averaging 18.5 points, about 11 rebounds. I think it's 10.5, 3 assists, a steal, 1.5 blocks, and only 1 turnover. The sky's the limit once the shots start to go in, wherever he may be taking them from. So that's why he is one of our favorite active stashes, and we're getting sort of glimpses of it right now. That to me was kind of the big story of the night, honestly. Let's get into the actual box scores and break things down a little bit. Chicago's fairly straightforward. Right now they're without Patrick Williams, so Ayo Dosunmu is getting the start. He was a little bit better in this one, had 2 steals and a block. The efficiency still wasn't great, which is kind of where we need Ayo to hang his hat if he's going to have fantasy value this year. He's an extremely low-end injury replacement option while Patrick Williams is on the shelf. It's the kind of guy you're playing if the wire has gone very bare, because even in this kind of good scenario, it pushes him up to like kind of filler status. Otherwise, the usual suspects. Kobe White had one of his better games. He's been sort of quietly decent all season long. Vooch is, I mean, the shooting was still great in this one. I think you're going to start to see him taper just a little bit. He's number 9 right now. He's still shooting 58% from the field, but 20 and 10 with 2 threes and all the defensive stats and everything. It's going to start to come down a little bit. This was still a pretty good ball game for him. Nothing eye-popping, but the shots were good. And then, you know, playing Washington is useful there. Meanwhile, Josh Giddey, just 26 minutes. He's just like, it seemed like he was going to be a priority for them when they traded Alex Caruso for Giddey after they could have gotten first-round picks for Caruso last year, but they're not giving Giddey all the minutes that we kind of assumed they would. What I think needs to happen for Chicago, and I don't know what the timeline of this is going to be, because Josh is currently number 171. He's slowly working his way up the board. I think he was in the 190s the last time we checked in. He's at 27 minutes, And, the counting stuff is pretty good for 27 minutes at 12 points, 6 boards, and 6.5 assists. But we need somebody out of his way. We need, whether it's Zach LaVine or Vooch or just somebody that handles the basketball or takes shots or whatever you want to call it. Giddey getting 6 shots in a game where 5 guys got double-digit field goal attempts I know it's fine. I know he wants to be a distributor first, but he's just got to be a bigger part of everything that's happening. And it's not going to happen until somebody gets traded, which I still kind of half assume is going to happen. They keep talking about how, various guys are on the trade block. But that could happen next week, or it could happen, February, or not at all is still a distinct possibility. It doesn't have to happen immediately, and it doesn't have to happen at all. So, I mean, I guess the thought process here is, if you're buying low on Josh Giddey, we talked about him before as a buy low option, you're giving up very, very little right now. And you're kind of treating him almost like an active stash, where maybe you give up someone like I would have said Jeremy Grant before he got hurt. That would have been a good one. Jonas Valanciunas is a good one because his timeline is not great for this year. Jared McCain, if you don't think the Stars are coming back in Philly, is a different answer than if you do. I don't know what you could get for crud. Julian Champagny, that's probably not going to get it done. You need to have somebody that has a little bit more stick. Try Draymond Green. But try it. Try Isaiah Stewart right now if somebody thinks he's about to do something more impressive. Because you're trying to capture a little bit of upside, and that's what Giddey has that a lot of guys don't. We already talked about Alex Sarr over on the Wizards side. The other stuff of note here, Malcolm Brogdon, 23 minutes. He's starting, but he's only playing half the ball game. So I actually don't think that Brogdon is a must-roster guy in the minutes he's getting. I like the stats he's putting up in his role right now. But if he and Bub Carrington are basically going to split the point guard minutes, which is kind of close to what happened in this ball game, then ultimately neither of them is going to have value in the short term. And we know the plan is to get Bub more action down the line, but I don't know if you can sit on... this was a better ball game, but I don't think you can sit on Bub if he's playing 24, 25 minutes a night. Everybody was waiting on Kyle Kuzma to have a slightly better ball game. This was sort of vintage Kuz, terrible percentages, but decent counting numbers. He's a points league guy. He has been. You guys have been on my case about him for years. As I told you, don't bother. Bilal, 37 minutes. This was not a very good ball game for him, but I still like the minutes, so I'm definitely hanging on to Coulibaly, mostly because of his role. And then the thought was that with Jordan Poole out, Keyshawn George might have a better ball game. He did not. Very easy to see there. 7 points, 4 rebounds. Not a good game for Keyshawn. And I think the story here, number one, is that they didn't play very well, so that was part of it. But, number two is Kuzma just did everything, and it kind of took the team out of their rhythm to some degree. So Kuzma's a hold if it's the right format for him. Sarr is the stash, and Coulibaly is the guy that I think you continue using. Jonas Valanciunas is extremely low-end center that you're barely hanging on to, but the other guys just really not safe enough. Milwaukee, without Giannis, went into Miami and got a win. The Bucks are sort of, not that quietly anymore. They've actually started to loudly play better. They've now won 5 games in a row to get back to 9-9 on the season. This was a vintage Damian Lillard game. 37 points on just 17 shots, a perfect 9 of 9 at the free throw line, and 8 3-pointers, 12 assists. They needed him to go huge with no Giannis in there, and Dame went huge to push himself up to number 13 in 9-cat with this gigantor game. I believe he is the number 1 by volume free throw guy in the NBA in terms of impact. Not the most per game, but combining the highest rate of hitting them at a volume. So that's been a really nice feather in his cap. I figured we'd get a better Bobby Portis game, but he was so god-awful in his minutes that Doc Rivers was like, nah, man. Bobby was a -8. He took 15 shots in 18 minutes, which is god-awful. And so they just went somewhere else. I honestly don't know how Milwaukee won this ball game because Brook Lopez was decent, and then Dame was great, and everybody else on the team was pretty gross. Well. Miami got an okay game out of Bam. He was in a little bit of foul trouble, or you probably would have seen those 31 minutes creep up closer to 36, 37. Tyler Hero, the field goal percent is starting to eke its way back down. He's down to number 42 in 9-cat now, and we still got a little bit of ways to go on this one. The 4 3-pointers a game still kind of floating it. Jimmy Butler, 23, 4, and 5, made a few more of his free throws, but didn't get the defensive stats. Terry Rozier came back on a minutes cap and had actually a pretty good ball game. And I wonder if Terry Rozier actually starts to play better if he's getting over his foot issue. Is it a buy low? I mean, I guess, but a lot of teams were contemplating dropping Rozier before this ball game, so you can probably get him for next to nothing. And I'm okay with taking a shot like that. It just, again, what can you offer the other team that they value slightly more than Terry Rozier? I don't know. Maybe it's a hot multi-week streamer or something like that. I would rather have Rozier because we know he can actually be decent in this team's offense. He did it the first week and a half, 2 weeks of the season before the wheels completely came off. Don't get me wrong. I don't think he's going to be good. So make sure not to misinterpret what we're talking about on that front. He's not going to be good, but he has a shot to be in kind of that 100 range, which again, doesn't grow on trees. It's useful for all formats. And if he can stay just above filler level, which he hasn't so far, then there's something there. Houston got out to a pretty good lead, sacrificed some of it, ended up hanging on in overtime at Minnesota. Big ball games from a number of key Rockets, not Tari Eason in kind of an interesting twist. Jabari Smith Jr. has come on lately. He's on about a 3 or 4 game heater at the moment. And that's pushed Eason down the board a tad. Amen Thompson was great. Şengün was great. He triple-doubled. Freddie VanVleet, 27, 8, and 11. Even Dylan Brooks had a good ball game. Jalen Green kind of pooped his pants in this one. That's where Amen Thompson's extra minutes came from. And that's why you hold... Well, Jalen Green is a points league guy, and Dylan Brooks I don't care about at all. But that's why you hold everybody else. And as I've said, I think Jabari Smith Jr. probably settles somewhere in the filler territory, which is kind of at the back end of the filler zone right now. But he was never going to be as bad as he was before. This is he was on a terrible swing. Now he's swinging back up again. Neither one of those things is who he is in aggregate. But we just had this discussion with Adam King on our mailbag show yesterday. One of the questions that came in was about how steals and percentages and stuff like that, like the wide fluctuations at the beginning of the year. It's actually all season long. Because you could take Jabari Smith Jr.'s year so far and break it into these really distinct chunks of like kind of serviceable for whatever it was. Like the first week he was okay, but not particularly good. And it was like maybe a week and a half. First week and a half or so, he was okay. And then Tari Eason came on, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. About 9 games in a row, he was just atrocious. And then 3 of the last 4, he's been pretty good again. And he's had these little intermittent explosion games, but Houston has so much depth that you got to be playing well if you want to stay on the court. And that's hard for guys that are only pretty good NBA players like Jabari Smith Jr. He's not going to be great every ball game. This game, he was great. Shot 8 out of 9. That's not a guy you're taking off the floor. He was a plus 30 in a game they won by 6. That's crazy, by the way. VanVleet was a plus 22. Şengün was a plus 28. Those guys were part of this lineup that was just running it up. And then the lineups gave it back again. I don't know what the point of all of that is, other than to say it's not going to be linear for these dudes. It's not going to be linear for Jabari Smith or the guys that are better. Let's see. Freddie VanVleet had another good ball game. Where does that put him? All right, he's back up inside the top 50 after that ejection game. Threw him down the board 25 slots. Good to have you back, Fred. Oh, wait a minute. Maybe he's higher than that. Do I need to refresh? I might need to refresh. Is that game officially in the books now? I guess it is. Either way. We're recording this, as you guys can see on your screen, before some of the last ball games are over. San Antonio, at the time of recording, and Utah are locked in a pretty good battle with about a quarter to play. But I think we have an idea of what this one is going to be, which is Very good game for Victor Wembanyama. Stephon Castle showing off the ability to score with, admittedly, some light holes in his fantasy game. Harrison Barnes has, to nobody's surprise, come back to earth after 3 mega ball games. Chris Paul will be fine. You're not super worried about that. And then Julian Champagny is the guy you're like, well, maybe it could be the, Ochai Abaji. Can we get a sort of efficient performance out of him and enough with Sohan and Vassell? And plus, it's worth pointing out that Devin Vassell is coming back in the Spurs' next ball game, which is tonight, Wednesday night. So if you were trying a Keldon Johnson or a Harrison Barnes or a Julian Champagny thing, you should consider shelving that thing that you're trying, because Vassell, who's probably going to take a little time to ramp himself up, but he's going to get most of that stuff. And he's going to take some stuff away from Stephon Castle, although they're going to shoehorn that young dude into as much as humanly possible because he's good. And he's also, we get back into this concept of the active stash. Castle is a really intriguing basketball player, but he's shooting sub 40% from the field and 72% at the free throw line, and he doesn't get that many steals or blocks. And so there's these holes in his 9-cat line where I'd love to be able to paper over them with the fact that he's scoring 20 points a game these days. That's awesome, but he really isn't doing almost anything else. Points League guys, you can take note. You don't have to do a bunch of other things. You can just rack it up in 1 or 2 categories. But 9-cat, you can't be sub-average in field goal, free throw, rebounds, steals, and blocks and be a positive fantasy player unless you're really, really, really good at 1 or 2 of the other categories. And he's pretty good at scoring right now, but that's it. So I hate to be the wet blanket here. Plus, there's the fact that the Spurs are far from healthy, because not only is Vassell out right now, but Jeremy Sohan is out. So, the Spurs, I think, are going to bring Castle along at whatever speed makes the most sense. It's not going to be slowly, because you can see they're giving him a lot to do already, and they love what he's capable of. But the holes in his fantasy game are probably not going away unless Chris Paul goes away. And that'll happen. I mean, CP3 is going to miss some ball games because he's old as dirt. But even when he goes down, Trey Jones is the backup point guard. It's not Castle. This comes back to a discussion we've had many times on the show of the shooting guards, whatever you want to, we need the shooting guards dilemma or something like that. It's really hard to be a shooting guard and have 9-cat fantasy value. If you love shooting guards and to some degree small forwards, you probably love points leagues, because it's much easier for those guys to have value, because all you need to do is score and get a little bit of a bunch of different things, and you can be okay. You're not going to be great. But shooting guards in 9-cat, typically good at points and threes and free throw percent, which Castle actually isn't that good at. And the ones that get over the hump, the shooting guards that elevate themselves, which, by the way, it's not a coincidence that there's not a single, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is the closest you could point to. There really isn't a single shooting guard until you get to Derek White at 19. Is Dyson Daniels? I guess Dyson Daniels is a shooting guard, but not really. I don't know who I would call the first true shooting guard in 9-cat rankings. Jordan Poole, probably, who's also kind of doubling as their point guard. Bradley Beal. It's hard. And the thing that these guys do, the thing that Beal does that gets him into the 30s, the thing that Poole's done that's gotten him into the 30s is defensive stats so far this year. But Stephon Castle doesn't have those either. I always like to point to guys like Zach LaVine, who are really exciting and really fun to watch. He scores 22 points a game. He has 3 3-pointers. He's an 83% free throw shooter, and he's actually a pretty damn good field goal guy, 51.5. But yet he's still barely inside the top 60 because the rebounds are meh, the assists are meh, the steals are meh, the blocks are meh. There's it's just really hard to have the shooting guard stat profile and get way up the board. That's not to say that Stephon Castle won't someday be a very good fantasy option. It's just not yet. And I don't even know that it's going to be later this year, because I don't know that the Spurs are going to go into sort of a traditional shutdown mode. They're 9-8 at the time of us recording this before this ball game is over. That's the 10 seed in the West. And I think they want to compete a little bit. That's why they went out and got some veterans. We can refresh this game because stuff has happened since we talked about, well, not much, I guess. Over on the Utah side, finally a Keontae George game. Good Lord, that was a long time coming. Sheesh. Lord have mercy. Still has 6 turnovers, but you know what? I can't bring myself to complain. It's like, it's been so long since we had a good ball game there. I can't bring myself to complain. Walker Kessler was a bit more human in this one. He'll be fine because he's starting and getting basically starter center minutes. Colin Sexton is hanging on by a thread, as per usual. And this, again, is without Jordan Clarkson. I don't know if Colin Sexton actually needs to be rostered. I'm sure if you dropped him, somebody would pick him up. And that's sort of the only good argument I have for why to hold on to Sexton. Because if you dropped him, someone else would pick him up and then hold, and maybe they would be able to reap some of the rewards. But his minutes are not that great. His volume is not that great. I don't know. I don't really see the appeal. He's number 154. He's got the shooting guard fantasy stat set problem, by the way. 16.5 points and literally nothing else. Good free throw number. Sorry, it's good free throw number. He's at 88% so far this year. You just can't be a 9-cat guy with 2 good categories. It's driving me crazy. But you never know. At some point, he might just take a few more shots, and then all of a sudden, he's a fantasy value again. So that, again, is basically the only argument to hanging on to Colin Sexton right now is, but what if he takes a few more shots? The nice thing in Utah is, for the moment at least, and I don't know what will happen when Jordan Clarkson comes back, but for the moment, they have 5 starters that are all involved from a fantasy standpoint. Whatever team build you're looking for, Keontae George, punting, definitely turnovers, also typically field goal percent. I know not for one day. John Collins is playing well. Lauri Markkanen slowed a bit in this ball game, but he had 2 or 3 really good ones in a row before that. Walker Kessler is going to do his center stuff, and you have your ups and downs from guys, but they're playing their guys right now because they pre-tanked. It's the beauty, the infinite wisdom of the pre-tank. The Jazz lost a crap ton of games right out of the chute, 12 prior to this one, to be exact, and understanding that the Pelicans are going to get some guys back and likely pass them in the rankings, the Jazz are already basically the bottom of the Western Conference. They don't have to be all that much worse because they can look over at the East and go, all right, well, the Sixers, provided Paul George and Joel Embiid start playing in the next week or so, they'll probably collect a few wins. The Raptors are going to try to collect a few wins as Scotty Barnes is back, and they'll get quickly back, and at some point, Bruce Brown and Kelly Olynyk. And so the Jazz are thinking, all we got to do is compete with the Wizards for the basement of record, and we'll be fine for Cooper Flag sweepstakes. So if we accidentally roll into a win or two, that's okay. They're not good with this lineup. They're fine. And there's no bench at all that they trust. So as soon as they take these guys out, all hell's going to break loose if it hasn't broken loose when they're in the ball game. So they'll still find ways to lose, but at least they can be competitive on the way there, and they can play their main guys. So that's the good news with Utah. The bad news is that all these guys have their warts to some degree. Certainly Sexton and Keontae, the biggest warts. I need to see a dermatologist size warts. And then the other guys, some, but perhaps not quite as significant. We'll take a quick commercial break before we get to the last game. And then, of course, as we were getting ready to go to the next ball game, word popped up that Lauri Markkanen suffered a knee contusion towards the conclusion of their that Utah game and had to be helped to the locker room. And that immediately jumps, of course, to the top of the board in terms of here we go again. He was really just starting to get it together. He had to be assisted to get to the locker room. That's not great. I didn't see that one in real time because we're recording an episode. But, I guess the question comes down of how bad was it? If it really is just a contusion, then hopefully we're talking about a couple of weeks. They've got the NBA Cup week, so everybody can kind of get right during that, and that would allow folks to maybe miss a slightly lower number of games than what it might otherwise be. But either way, this is an unfortunate development. And I don't know that there's an obvious ad in this one with Markkanen going down. Basketball Monster has it listed as a 3-game absence. I think that's just kind of an early estimate, that a little bit more of a guess. Bryce Sensabaugh, the guy who had a decent ball game here, but all 3-pointers, literally nothing else on the board besides 1 steal. And if anything, this just means that we were just talking about Keontae George, Colin Sexton, guys like that, they're going to have more to do and might have plenty to do even once a Jordan Clarkson comes back. So it creates a little bit of a hammock for Sexton, guys that we were just talking about a second ago. But mostly it's just bad news for Markkanen, and we hold our breath that it's not too terrible. Lakers look slow as molasses. That feels like a very southern way to phrase it, and that's not where I'm from. But like, just watching the Lakers, that whole team, other than like Gabe Vincent and maybe Max Christie, the team all looks totally stuck in the mud. Have we figured out the whole Cam Reddish thing is not a viable solution? Like, why are we going through these same machinations again? And I'm not getting all fussy just for the sake of getting fussy. I think we're going to see a change. I think we're going to see either Dalton Connect get into the starting lineup just to try to give them a little bit more firepower, because right now Rui Hachimura looks bad. I thought he was getting sort of heated back up again, and he's just getting pushed around. You know, he goes through these stretches where he looks like he cares about rebounding, and then he goes through stretches where he's just getting moved. Like the third quarter of this game, and I know I watch these games more closely because, like I've said before, sometimes I sort of cover the Lakers in my mind, and I don't always put those thoughts out on paper or across the internet airwaves. But like, Rui guarding Yusuf Nurkic should be a mismatch, but it shouldn't have been as god-awful as it became. There's just a lack of effort from a lot of guys on the Lakers right now, and Rui's one of them. So, does that mean that Dalton Connect might sneak back into the ad pile? It's possible. I don't think that I would write him off completely, and I know he's going to get dropped, and he should, because he's been bad since Rui came back these last couple of ball games. But don't give up on Connect just yet. I think tonight, Lakers play again on this overload day. This will be the test. Do they make the switch? Does that get him back into sort of the good graces? Meanwhile, if you're going to talk bad news for the Lakers, Jackson Hayes was going up for a garbage time dunk and blew out his ankle again. So he's likely out for a while. That means Christian Koloko is going to play more, and that means the Lakers get even smaller and even slower again. But at least from a fantasy standpoint, Anthony Davis was good in this game. D'Lo was a little bit better. The shooting wasn't particularly good, and I don't know why he continues to not be able to shoot the basketball, but he was a bit more heavily involved, which at least was something. And I think they're realizing the same thing that the Lakers coaching staff realized last year, which is they can try to put Cam Reddish in there to make the starting unit defense better, and they can try to play Gabe Vincent, and they can try to play Max Christie, but ultimately, there are too many holes defensively on this Lakers roster where plugging one D'Angelo Russell-shaped hole doesn't fix the problem. Russell's a problem defensively, but so is LeBron, and so is Reeves like 60% of the time, and so is Rui Hachimura like 85% of the time. So plugging the D'Lo issue leaves 3 more issues. So either you just lean into scoring, which would be play D'Lo more, play Dalton Connect more, and just say, screw it, we're not going to rebound and we're not going to play defense. Or you keep pussyfooting around the issue and you're like, oh, we're going to put a defensive guy in there. But look at what Cam Reddish does. So I would expect some pretty good size changes for the Lakers, and that's the reason that I wanted to spend a second on them. It's not because they're bad, because at times they are quite bad, but mostly because I think you're about to see a little bit of a shift, and that's why the D'Lo, like, darkest before the dawn thing comes into focus right now. And, you know, what is Dalton Connect going to be in the next week or two? This is all a thing. I also, and I know that there's, like, teams are not going to give up because it's a regular season game and it matters. I don't think the Lakers want to win the NBA Cup again this coming year. And I don't want to say that there's like point shaving going on because that's real tinfoil hat crap. But They got really bad after the NBA Cup last season when everybody else got to rest for 5 days and they didn't. And this old crotchety bunch probably needs the rest. Over on that Phoenix side, the starters are back. Kevin Durant's back. Bradley Beal is back. Everything is as it should be. All 5 starters had good fantasy lines. That's what happens against the Lakers these days. I'm still lightly skeptical of Yusuf Nurkic as a long-term position, but Tyus Jones, Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, Bradley Beal, and then mostly Yusuf Nurkic, these guys are all fine, and you don't really need to worry about the other stuff. Even though Royce O'Neal had a nice little quick 9-9 game, the minutes are not going to be there right now, at least, while the team is at full strength and while Nurk is in one of his better runs. And that actually is that for this Tuesday recap. Of course, Wednesday, we've got this giant card coming up tonight, but that's not the next thing on the docket. We'll be back with you guys in a few hours, a little bit later on this morning, with some hot and cold action. See if we can locate some buy and sell stuff in that hot and cold action and make it actionable. You know, hot and cold action that's actionable. Great podcasting there, Dan. But we'll try to take that information, see if we can do anything with it. And then tomorrow, Thanksgiving Day, I need to make a final decision that I haven't made yet. Truth be told, you guys are just getting the what goes through Dan's brain as he's figuring out how to put together these podcasts. Do we want to just do the weekend review show on Thursday and then Friday do some sort of specialty show? I'd like to maybe get a Saturday show on as a Friday recap, so there isn't such a long gap between the last time we talk about box scores being Thursday all the way to Monday. So I got to work out the little pieces of what's coming up over the next few days here on Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. But all you guys got to do is subscribe, hit the like button if you're watching. That's the way you'll make sure that you get all this stuff whenever the hell it drops and whatever the hell it might be. Drop that 5-star review. Please do continue to help out however you can on that front. Find me on Twitter at Dan Vespers and at Old Man Squad on the new Blue Sky. And let's keep growing this thing together. Make those moves, set those lineups, try to keep your guys healthy as best you can. Burn some incense, sacrifice a live goat, whatever it takes. Let's just get to the damn NBA Cup week, and then we can all get right. Have a great couple of hours. We'll see you soon.